All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Irwin. I am the Chief Communications Manager for the City of Arvada, and I have the privilege of moderating tonight's Arvada City Council Public Forum. It's going to focus on the city's response to the COVID-19 health crisis. I think we'll get started with the next slide, please. First of all, we just want to welcome everyone for participating, and particularly the participants here. The Mayor Williams and members of council will be here to provide their remarks and ask questions and answers. We have members of the city team also here to give an update on what's been happening with the city's response to COVID-19 and what are the next steps, as well as to answer some live questions. And thanks to everyone who's listening on Channel 8 and Channel 880, as well as streaming live on our live stream on the city's website. So thanks for everybody for coming, and for those that offered questions or do offer questions. Know that just a reminder for participants to mute their phones if they are not actively speaking. If you have questions, we've received a number of questions in advance. However, if you have questions, you can ask them live right now by emailing covidresponse@arvada.org. And finally, just a reminder that we will be playing a recording of this forum on Channel 8 for the next over the next week, and we will make a recording available online as well. Next slide, please. I want to give everybody a sense of what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to hear from City Manager Mark Devon, who's going to give an overview of the city's response to the health crisis. We'll receive some updates across our work systems. Essentially, all of the departments and areas of work in the city will provide a very high-level update on how COVID-19 has impacted them and how we've responded. We'll do a little bit of a deeper dive into the city's financial position and get an update from Finance Director Brian Archer. And we're already focused on recovery and having discussions about that. And we'll hear from Human Resources Director Linda Haley, who's leading the effort to work through our approach to recovery. Finally, we'll get some remarks and questions from council. Council's invited, obviously, to ask questions throughout. But I want to remind everyone involved that we have collected almost 20 questions from folks in the community already, and may get some additional questions on COVID response at arvada.org during the call. So we want to make sure that we're leaving time for people to have their questions answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Manager Mark Devon and ask that we advance the slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you to the Arvada community. It's a pleasure to provide a report out on how we have responded to the COVID-19 public health crisis. We have viewed this from the very beginning as a once-in-a-lifetime challenge and opportunity for those of us that work for the city on behalf of all the citizens, that we had an opportunity here to do something unusual and important and critical in standing up the city operation during this particular time. Our focus has been to implement actions to protect the health and safety of our community, certainly also the health and safety of our team members who are providing the services during this critical time. We've also taken the opportunity to pivot and change direction as conditions around us change. This was really exemplified, I think, by the speed and urgency that we set up the small business emergency loan program. Again, with the tremendous support from the City Council. It was something that we literally put together in a couple of weeks, and I'm proud of the fact that we've been able to get checks out and payments out over this last week since we stood that program up. But that wasn't the only thing we did. We stood up remote programs throughout our organization. We've continued to accept development applications. We've continued to conduct building inspections. We've continued to provide important police services, which has required us to literally improvise as we go along. We've provided our officers and others out there working in the community with the appropriate PPE and for their health and safety. And we've looked at and changed conditions around which we have provided services to the community. For example, we've been able to keep our parks and trails and open space areas open, while at the same time taking facilities such as our picnic shelters and our play courts and the skate park, and roped them off and kept them out of public use as best we can. We've done quite a bit to keep operations going. And what I would like to suggest that we do at this point is ask the members of our leadership team that are in charge of our different departments and work systems to report out on the actions that they've taken. So I'd like to begin with our Chief of Police, Link Straight. Link.
Hello, Council. Real quick, I just want to go over the things that the police department tried to do early on to make sure that we were able to provide police services throughout this pandemic. The first thing we did was create objectives for the organization. And we wanted to make sure that we communicated those clearly to our officers. And I'm not going to go through all of those objectives here right now, but one of the key things that we did was identify our enforcement strategy. And that's not just related to complaints about COVID, it is our enforcement strategy as a whole, how we were going to contact the public, how we were going to change the business that we were required to do. We communicated that to our officers. We wanted to keep a mind on the fact that we had to build a relationship and maintain a relationship throughout this event that we would have to answer to when it was all said and done. And then the other thing that we focused on in communicating to our organization was our recovery efforts, what we were going to do today to make sure that we were accounting for everything that we had to do, and then be able to communicate that when it came to the time where we're going to go work through our recovery of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Link. We would like to now hear from our infrastructure work system, and that includes Director of Utilities Sharon Israel and Director of Public Works Don Wick. Sharon, would you start us off, please?
Actually, Mark, this is Don Wick, the Director of Public Works, and I'm going to be speaking on behalf of the infrastructure team tonight, including my partner in utilities, Director Sharon Israel.
Thank you, Don.
The infrastructure work system has continued to deliver on the utility side fresh water. We have also been delivering our wastewater services, stormwater services, and those important utilities. On the public works side, we have continued to work on our 2020 street maintenance plan, our concrete replacement plan, and on the engineering side, we have continued to work on our public infrastructure construction projects, including our inspectors who have been out in the field. In other words, we continue to deliver the important infrastructure to the community of Arvada. And I would just like to say on behalf of both Sharon and me that we're very proud and thankful to our field workers who are out there every day delivering these critical infrastructure services, and they continue to deliver these services to the community, which they have a great deal of admiration for. So thank you on behalf of the infrastructure team for the work they're doing.
Thank you, Don. Gordon, please give us an update on vibrant community and neighborhoods.
Thank you. Our focus in vibrant communities and neighborhoods remains on delivering programs and services to Arvada citizens and guests, and we do that in 5 different areas. As was mentioned, Arvada Parks maintenance staff has been maintaining the green infrastructure of our community without interruption, and we've also been working closely with our recreation partners. Although our 65+ playgrounds remain closed, our 4 skate parks, and our 50 tennis courts, our dog parks and disc golf courses remain open, all of which follow the governor's order for social distancing. We're scheduled to open Arvada Reservoir on May 4th, and we were able to open the very popular free mulch program to all citizens at Long Lake Ranch. And we've been able to change the nature center at Majestic View from a walk-in nature center to a virtual nature center, still being able to provide all the environmental education services that it once did. We even have plans to make this year's Arbor Day a virtual celebration. In terms of number 2, Arvada Golf, We closed the golf courses, Westwoods and Lake Arbor, on March 16th, but we reopened them on April 10th to limited play following the Jeffco Public House provisional rules concerning golf course operations. Although the clubhouses and the restaurants, the driving range and practice facilities are closed, we are able to provide golf again to the community. Number 3, Arvada housing and homelessness. Our housing staff is continued to be focused on housing preservation and have been working hard to create a human services assistance program using the Community Development Block Grant CARES Act monies that was approved as part of the federal stimulus program. We began a homeless navigator program at the first of the year, and our homeless navigator continues to work with Arvadans experiencing homelessness, focusing on sheltering them during the severe weather, working with other nonprofits in Arvada that provide essential services, and working with their partners, other navigators in all the Jeffco cities, to ensure that we continue to follow our regional strategy for homelessness. In our community resources area, and that includes neighborhood engagement, festivals and special events, and arts and culture, we've really focused in neighborhood engagement on community messaging regarding what neighbors can do to help each other during these times. And in our festivals and special events, while we had to cancel 3 of them, the High Tea for Seniors, Arvada on Tap, and a third one, we've been able to really focus on rescheduling them and making them bigger and better than ever. And then lastly, in Arvada events, and that's our banquet and conference operations at the Arvada Center. It remains closed, as does the Arvada Center. And as many hospitality venues have experienced, we've experienced the loss of booked events, over 100, that represent about 16,000 guests and a loss of revenue of approximately $500,000. But we remain in contact with all of our clients and are working hard to reschedule their events, as many as possible. So from our perspective, Vibrant Communities and Neighborhoods continues to focus on delivering services to our citizens and our guests, and that would be our update.
Thank you, Gordon. Ryan, can we receive an update from Community and Economic Development?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thanks for letting us the opportunity to talk about what Community and Economic Development is doing. So we play an important role in allowing or helping get the private sector to invest in our community, and that plays an important role in what is the recovery of the community of Arvada. So there are 3 main areas in which we do that work. One is the development review process, which brings people into the city and has us looking at what types of projects they would like to develop and invest in the community. The good news that I have to share with the community tonight is that over the past 6 or 7 weeks, we've really actually seen an uptick in the number of applications and the number of submittals that we've been getting. And so it shows that Arvada is still a highly desirable area and a place that folks want to invest in. Second, we've seen a steady increase in our building permit process. A lot of this is related to a lot more people being at home these days. And as a result of that, they're looking around their house and they're saying, I think I want to build a deck, or I want to make this improvement and that. And they've been contacting the city and they're able to still get their building permits. And so we're excited that people are still investing in their homes and working through our building department. The next part of the building process is really building inspections. And so while we've had to make some modifications to the style of inspections that we do, we're doing less inspections for homes that are occupied. We are still able to do all the new construction inspections, all of the commercial inspections, and we are working creatively with the contractors to see how we can get some of those DIY projects inspected, and so that those can continue. Some of the systems that we're using is video inspections and things like that we're trying out. The third thing that's under the Community and Economic Development work system is really economic development. And economic development has been working extremely hard with our business community right now. This is largely an economic crisis as well as a public health crisis, and therefore our economic development folks are really needing to support those businesses. Our team is not alone, and they've been working heavily with the business, with the Chamber of Commerce, the Apex Center, the BID, and several other business entities in Arvada. And so we're grateful for those strong relationships and partners. So one thing, as City Manager Devin alluded to, we did have the very successful emergency loan fund program in which we have, as of today, exhausted all of those funds. However, I want the businesses and the community to know that there are a number of other initiatives that they can find on the Arvada Emergency Business Recovery Initiative located on arvada.org. And so the loan funds have been exhausted for now. Hopefully we can get some of those paid back and recirculate those funds. But there's a host of other resources available to businesses as well, available at the site I mentioned. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Ryan. And the final work system we'll hear from is Organization and Service Effectiveness, and our City Attorney, Rachel Morris, will provide an update.
Thank you, Mark. Our organizational service effectiveness work system is composed of our finance, HR, IT, city manager's office, and legal teams. As part of those teams, our communication engagement team has provided great information to our community throughout this emergency. You've no doubt seen their updates on social media, our website, and in other locations. Our IT team has done a fabulous job of obtaining and preparing us to use the remote meeting technology, such as the technology we're using tonight for this meeting. Our legal team has been busy drafting emergency declarations, emergency ordinances, and otherwise providing advice to make sure we retain legal compliance during these times. Our purchasing team has redirected its effort and done a great job of getting the equipment that we need so that our employees can remain in the field and providing service to the community. And last but not least, our emergency management team has been in constant communication with our local, state, and federal partners to remain informed and to help plan and guide our efforts in emergency and recovery operations.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sorry, Mark, thank you very much for Mr. Devin and members of the LT team for that update. I'd like to ask us to advance several slides. I think, yeah, one more slide, please. We're going to turn it over here in a moment to Finance Director Brian Archer. In planning the forum tonight, we know that people have some questions about the city's financial position given the health crisis, and also more and more dialogue happening in our community and elsewhere around the next steps towards recovery. Just wanted to highlight, I believe Emily and Katie are watching today. They just sent in questions, and hopefully some of this will get to some of their questions, particularly around the recovery and when we might expect to open city facilities and things of that nature. And so with that, I turn it over to Finance Director Brian Archer. Brian?
Thank you, Ben. Mayor, Council, always a pleasure to get to talk to you about finance. I was told to keep this brief, so I'll do my best. Sometimes I get a little excited, a little wound up when I talk numbers, so I will try to keep this as high level as possible. As Council is well aware, we do a 10-year financial plan. That can be difficult. It is hard to look out in the future and really try to understand better what is going on. But what that does is it makes us more conservative. One of the items that City Council did years ago was create a 17% required reserve policy. This is approximately 2 months worth of operating expenditures. But what City Council did is they require this in each and every year of the 10-year financial plan. So not only today, but also at the end of now 2030. What this enables the city to do is make sure everything we add today, we can pay for throughout the model. It also allows us a longer time horizon when we come up with challenges. So instead of having to fix something in 1 year or even 2 years, we have 10 years to address that concern. Now, are we going to have to make changes to our 10-year financial plan? Of course we are going to have to. But by being more conservative, these changes can happen over the long run. I would like to remind City Council that as part of last year's budget cycle, we did bring to you the preliminary of a recession plan. Council had some great input on that, and we'll be bringing that back to you during this year's budget process. Second, let's talk a little bit about our city revenue and where we get a majority of it from. 68% of the revenue in 2019 came from sales and use tax. That is a very large number. So obviously the closure of bars and restaurants, smaller retail operations is going to affect us. But one of the benefits we have here at the city is a large percentage of our revenue comes from essential businesses. Businesses like Costco, Sam's Club, King Soopers, Home Depot. Another benefit, or in some cases not such a benefit for the city, is we don't have a mall. We don't have a university. We don't have a lot of big box retail. No IKEA, no Macy's. What does that mean? That means we do not have high highs, but we usually do not have low lows. So that brings us to our next step. What are we doing in the finance department with our peers to really understand and try to analyze what this COVID-19 health challenge is going to do to us financially? So of course we're looking at sales tax, but the challenge with sales tax is it lags 1 month. Today, March sales tax were due. And so after today, we will get a good idea of the effect to each and every one of our businesses. Certainly we know the small retails that have been closed since approximately March the 18th are looking at lower revenues. The larger retails, the King Soopers, the Costcos, are looking at higher returns for the month of March due to a lot of people running out and making sure that they had essentials. What will that difference be? This won't be too hard for us to identify. What will be hard is the cultural change that we're expecting to happen over the next few months and maybe even the next few years. So certainly, as we continue to get sales tax revenues in and continue to look at things like gasoline tax, purchases of new vehicles, and as Ryan spoke earlier, construction receipts, we will better understand the effects that the COVID-19 will have locally. Next steps is to continue our budget process, which will happen during June and July, and present City Council alternatives of what we can do to recover from this COVID challenge. Mr. Devon, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Brian. Those were great remarks. I think there's some questions that have been asked that I'll have an opportunity to answer as we go along here. That your financial summary has provided a great backdrop and great context for the answers that I'll be providing. Ben, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I just would say that the next step, we want to have a discussion about recovery and would invite Human Resources Director Linda Haley to provide some remarks in that regard.
Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Again, my name's Linda Haley. I'm the Director of Human Resources, and I am also honored to be able to help with our leadership team lead our recovery efforts. As we're still responding to the COVID crisis, it's important that we have that recovery mindset at top of mind. And what will we be doing next? How and when do we want to open our community? How and when do we want to open our organization back up? All of those things are being discussed as we speak. And if you did tune into Governor Polis's press conference this afternoon, he had mentioned his change to softening some of the restrictions and looking more at the safer at home guidelines that will be in place as of April 27th. We will continue to be following state and local health guidelines as it relates to Arvada's own reopening efforts, and we want to assure all of our citizens and our employees that the safety and well-being of everyone is the top priority as we look into a recovery plan. And as I'm sure you all know, recovery is a very long haul, not something that we take lightly, nor will we act on hastily. We need to make sure that we are deliberate in an approach to eventually recover. And we also are realistic in that approach, knowing that it will take some time to fully recover as a community and an organization. So what are we going to do first? It will be a phased approach where we will start with reopening our community, our businesses, our organization. How that looks and specific steps that we will take are the things that we're mapping out as we speak now. Our leadership team will be meeting with our recovery team tomorrow, as a matter of fact, to discuss more details and what it looks like for all of us come April 27th and in the weeks and months ahead. I know this has been mentioned in a theme all along that recovery is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint, and we will be very cautious and deliberate in the approach to ensure the safety and well-being of our community. And the time frame obviously is beginning now and will continue for as long as it takes to ensure that we can be even stronger and more cohesive as a community than we were before COVID-19. That is our assurance to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Mayor and Council, now we turn to you. We would like to certainly hear any remarks from you and questions, specific questions you'd like to have. Just a bit of a time check. We had originally thought that this would go about an hour and thought we'd start around 6:15. Didn't really get started until 6:40. So we're hoping to go to that 7:30, 7:40 timeframe, and we'll check in with you and see if we can go even a little bit longer in order to answer more questions. But we have about 20 questions waiting for you. But before we get to those, we did want to give Council an opportunity, starting with Mayor Williams, to offer remarks and questions to our leadership team. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Ben, and thank you, Arvada. You've done a tremendous job of making huge personal sacrifices, not just individually, but through your businesses. The impacts it's had on your families, your way of life has been dramatically altered during this very, very difficult time. And the reward is that indeed what you've done and what you've sacrificed has made a big difference. From the projections we originally had of what this coronavirus was going to do to our community and to the nation and to the world, we're relieved to see that the impacts have been much less. And I don't think that's because it was a false alarm. I think it's because of the efforts that all of us have made to address this responsibly, have made the impacts less severe than what the worst case scenario was. We still mourn the losses of people who we have lost as a result of this, and we will remember them. And I want to take a moment to thank our first responders through our police department, through the fire department, through the ambulance services, and certainly those who are working in the trenches, in the hospitals, where they are seeing, I think, some evils that they never wanted to see. And so I want to thank each and every one of you who are involved in those areas. I also want to thank our team at the city. You have shown remarkable fortitude, resilience, and professionalism. We had a call earlier or late last week where we had over 388 of our team members on the call, and the pride we as a city council feel for the team we have assembled here at the city of Arvada that are really pulling in one direction for the benefit of our citizens. Our citizens can be proud that indeed we have that stability, and frankly that we've got the financial resources that we have held on to during the good times so that now they are available during these bad times. And one of the announcements that Mr. Devon has made to our team is that we are not looking at furloughs at the city of Arvada, unlike some of our neighboring communities. And I think that's important, not just for our team members, but also for the benefit of our citizens long term. So I want to thank everyone for what you're doing. We're not there yet, but we will get there, and we can do this, Arvada. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any council members have questions based on the updates that they've received so far from the leadership team? You can raise your hand to the mayor to be recognized, or we can move on to constituent questions. Mayor,
I see no raised hands.
Okay, great. Well, let's get right into it. So again, just to remind people, we've asked people to submit questions by email over the last few days, and to call in with questions over late last week and into the weekend. And now people can actually ask questions live by using the email address covidresponse@arvada.org. We want to kick things off with a question about resuming economic activity. Jeff had a comment. He said small businesses should be allowed to open with social distancing in place. He references restaurants with outdoor seating as an example. He says we need to use all we have learned and move forward. And I failed to mention, I think I'm going to be addressing these to start with to City Manager Mark Devon, and he can sort of work with the mayor and decide who wants to take the lead on that. But a lot of these are implementation based and operations based. So based on that, Mark, Devon, Jeff thinks that we should start opening businesses now.
So I appreciate Jeff's question, and frankly, on a personal level, I certainly agree with him. I think the determination on when and how businesses will be open will depend on the guidance that is received from our partners at the state and county level, and the local. For example, Jefferson County Public Health, Tri-County Public Health, which serves the Adams County portion of Arvada, and then also the interpretation and the guidance of the orders that we have received from the governor. And the governor had a press conference this afternoon where he talked about sort of a phased reopening plan that allows for some limited reopening over a period of time, and ultimately some additional reopening as data associated with the public health crisis in terms of illnesses and things like that occur over time. So we will work very strongly with the business community to implement all orders associated with reopening. We'll assist them in trying to figure out social distancing protocol. And I can tell you on a personal level, I can't wait to go back to eating in restaurants because we have some great restaurants in Arvada. It would be outstanding to get them back open. But our ability to open those will be very much dependent on the orders that come from the state and county levels of government and their public health, the public health officials.
That's great, thank you. And again, if any members of council want to add on to these questions or clarify or offer remarks, raise your hand, and Mayor Williams, please interrupt and let us know if someone wants to share. I'm going to go to a question from Katie, who just emailed it in. It's about Arvada, the Arvada Emergency Business Recovery Initiative. Katie would like to get an update on the program and how many businesses applied for the bridge loan funding and how much funding has been provided, and just generally where we're at with that program.
Thank you, Ben. I think either Brian Archer or Ryan Chelsea can answer that question. Could one of you please answer that question for Emily?
Sure. We were playing chicken, seeing who was going to go first. I won. So the program had $2.5 million allocated to it. That was $1 million from the city, $1 million from Aura, and $500,000 from AIDA. And so we're grateful for our partners coming together in this really unique opportunity. I believe that the number of businesses that apply over the course of the 6 days that it was open, well, the 6 business days, it opened last Monday, was about 320. And we were able to fund 256 independent loans with that money. And unfortunately, we are out of funding at this point in time. And so all the businesses that we were not able to fund through this initial amount of money, we are putting on a wait list. And so if money does come back in, we're going to be able to provide them with loans in updated round.
Mr. Marriott?
Yeah, I wanted to just add on to the answer there that while initially here all the applications have been taken and the money has all been allocated, this is a loan program that part of it is forgivable. So there will be money coming back. And as Ryan Stachelski just mentioned, there's kind of a waiting list. And so as money comes back, and the mayor made, I think, a really great comment that for businesses who do get a PPP loan through the federal government, if you would pay this back right away, you'll be able to help your neighbors, your neighboring business, because that money can then be reloaned out again to another applicant that's on the list. So while so far we've helped 256 businesses, I think the total amount that will be helped will be higher than that by some number.
Okay, great. I think we'll move on to the next question, if that's okay. Thanks for those comments. The next question comes, it's actually a question and a comment from Anita and Patrick, respectively. It has to do with masks. They have some concerns and had some questions about the use of masks, and generally related to, shouldn't the use of masks and facial coverings be mandatory for everyone in the city of Arvada across the community? So I guess I'd start with you, Mr. Devin, and take it where you will.
Sure. My understanding of the governor's order is that he does want everyone to wear masks, and they should wear masks out in public when they're out and about. Our focus in terms of requiring masks to be worn has to do with our team, our city team that is out there providing services. To that end, we have purchased thousands of masks that we are providing to our city team members so that they can provide the services in a safe manner. And we are in the process of distributing those masks right now for those that the essential employees that are continuing to work out in the public at this time. And when our team members return as we transition to the next phase of this public health crisis, we'll be providing our team members that return to work in their work environments with masks as well. So just to prove the point, I've got my mask right here, and I am wearing it when I walk outside of my office. I am not wearing it right now because it would probably be very hard for most of you to understand me. But I am wearing it when I leave my office, and will continue to wear it throughout the rest of this public health crisis.
Okay, thank you. The next question has to do with streets maintenance. Chris had a question about infrastructure and how funding for streets maintenance will be affected by the city's loss in sales tax revenue because of COVID-19.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that question. We are going forward with our 2020 street maintenance program. There will be no change in our 2020 street maintenance program. We'll continue to move that forward. Now, as Mr. Archer mentioned when he gave his financial update, might we have to look at some changes in the future? The answer is yes, but we plan to be very strategic and very mindful of the long-term priorities and the long-term commitments that we've made in our funding program. And one of those long-term commitments is around infrastructure maintenance and the reinvestment in our existing infrastructure. Right now, we are putting in approximately $10 million a year into our infrastructure, and we are focused right now on continuing to do that, not only in 2020, but into the future. Again, I think we have to fully analyze the impacts, long-term impacts to, from a financial standpoint, to our financial picture as a result of this crisis. But we will have a priority on maintaining our infrastructure because that is a strategic focus. It's been a strategic focus by the City Council, and it will continue to be a strategic focus by those of us responsible for discharging our responsibilities.
Yeah, Mayor.
Mr. Piper, yes.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question to Mr. Devin? I've heard a little chatter through social media around what are we going to do with our bond projects when we talk about maintenance? Are those still on track? Are we good to still move forward with those? Maybe you can share some insight of where we are with the 72nd Avenue and Ralston Road bond projects. Are they going to be affected by that?
Thank you, Councilmember Pfeiffer. And no, they will not be affected by the by this public health crisis. Those bond projects are funded by a voter-approved initiative in 2018. The initiative enabled us to go out and issue bond proceeds. We have those funds set aside basically in a separate fund from the rest of our revenues, and we do not foresee any inability or any issue with us being able to go forward with those projects. As I said, the funding has been set aside specially for those projects, and we will go forward. In fact, we are continuing to acquire right-of-way and other property for both the West 72nd and Ralston Road projects. We're continuing to move forward in the finalization of plans for those projects, and we're continuing to move forward to schedule those projects to get completely designed and out to bid. So there will be no stopping in those projects.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We got another emailed question, just generally about crime in Arvada. Is it about the same level as last year or more or less? What if any, impacts have we seen from COVID on crime in Arvada?
I'm going to ask our Chief of Police, Link Straight, to answer that question.
Sure. What we saw initially after the pandemic was we saw a sharp decrease in our calls for service and crime, and also per request, our officer-initiated calls for service. However, since then, we have seen an uptick in some of our property crimes to include car theft, so please lock your cars, and domestics, and then just calls for service about people out in the parks and so forth and so on. So our calls for services have again actually surpassed what they were prior to the COVID issue. Our crime trends, what I would caution everybody right now is that this is such a small period of time that I wouldn't put a lot of concern in crime trends. We're talking about small numbers. We're going to need some longer time to really understand the impact of COVID and our crime rate.
So we've got a couple people with hands up. Mr. Jones, you're first.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up with that. With the jails and the number of inmates that are being released from county jail and in Denver and other county jails, are we seeing any impact of that? Now, I don't know that these are hardened criminals. I don't know what their offenses were or are, but are we seeing any impact in our city with regard to those inmates being released?
So we just had a phone call today with all the Jefferson County chiefs of police and the sheriff to actually have that discussion about how we're going to move forward from this, because certainly the ability for us to put people in the jail was reduced as a result of this. That is very concerning for us. So what we have done is that if we, the initial response was first, second, and third class felonies. Well, that left a lot of felonies on the board and a lot of felony warrants that we weren't able to jail people for that we normally would. So if we arrested somebody on a fifth-degree felony, we had to release them. So they were out in the community again. And some of those felonies could have included weapons violations. So anecdotally, we certainly all of the area chiefs have cases of individuals that we released that was a little uncomfortable for us, that we normally wouldn't have done. What we've been able to do is, under certain circumstances, we've been able to call the sheriff and the jail and say, we understand that this individual may not fit what we normally jail somebody on, but we're making a recommendation because of the behavior that they were in, the violence that they were involved in, and the possibility that they were armed. The jail has been very receptive to that and has accepted those individuals. The other part I want to mention is that none of these restrictions in the jail prevent us from doing or jailing anybody that would be jailable under the Victim Rights Act. So somebody that's been involved in a domestic, which I think is one of the questions further down, we still have the ability to jail them. It's a requirement that they be jailed. So if somebody's involved in domestic violence, we respond. there's a crime, we're going to arrest them, they're going to go to jail just like they normally would. I know that's a long way around it, but yes, we are concerned about the long-term impact on our ability to jail those that have committed violent offenses in our community.
Mr. Pfeiffer, you had your hand up at one point. Did you take it down?
Yeah, Councilmember Jones asked the same question, so thank you.
Right. Ms. Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Strait, my question was actually going to be about domestic violence. So thank you for pointing out that that will be coming up later in the town hall. I did also want to ask, though, about just really low-level crimes, things that might be, for instance, teenagers getting bored or people who are getting restless and maybe breaking some low-level rules. Are we going to be considering doing community service projects or things for those people in the future, or even currently, maybe litter pickup or something like that to better spend those energies, I would think?
So I would answer that by first saying this: the officers of the Arvada Police Department have always used a great deal of discretion when they go out and they contact somebody who's been involved in a low-level crime, especially juveniles. And they've been very creative in their response and what is most appropriate as far as a criminal charge for them or something of that nature. The city courts have also been very responsive to try to find alternatives for those, especially those low-level first responders, to make sure that we're not introducing them into the criminal justice system when they don't need to be. Is there something else that we can do? And certainly the district attorney's office has been great, and Jefferson County courts have been great with that too. So that has been in place, but certainly we're looking at all opportunities right now.
Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Actually, the chief referenced it, and I think we'll just jump to it. Lee emailed us some questions earlier today. One of them was, what is the city doing and the Arvada Police Department doing to help those who are experiencing domestic violence during the COVID-19 health crisis? Chief, could you talk a little bit about your approach there? You're on mute right now, sir.
Yes, and part of the question also asked about if we're going to change our procedures. And what I would say to that is that the Arvada Police Department has very strong procedures and practices in place currently in policy to address domestic violence. We don't really see a need to change those procedures. Those procedures have been proven out through our work with victim rights groups, victim advocates, and the district attorney's office. So I would say that we certainly follow best practices as it relates to domestic violence. And in some cases, we've actually been the ones that have trailblazed those best practices at APD. So again, the Victim Rights Act allows us to arrest and jail those people that are involved in domestic violence who have perpetrated domestic violence. So the restrictions from the jail do not keep us from putting those people in jail and removing them from the situation so the victim then can seek some help.
Great. Perhaps might still stay with public safety, but we've gotten a number of questions around enforcement of the stay-at-home order and physical distancing. Mindy, for example, shared some concerns about people queuing in front of local businesses for curbside pickup and the like, and wondering, she wanted to know if the city will consider regulating gatherings of people. And I mean, it's a good question. We hear a lot about enforcement of this, and so I'm wondering if members of the city team, perhaps starting with Chief Strait, could talk about our approach to enforcement.
Yes, our enforcement strategy has been one of education. We want to make sure that we're working with the community. We don't want to go out there and just enforce on this. We understand that this is difficult on all sides. People want to be out, they want to engage, they want to be able to do the things that they used to do. They want to get outside. We recognize that. So when we get a complaint about a group, what we'll do is we'll go to that group, we'll remind them of the requirements and ask them to disperse and maintain appropriate distance. So what we have asked is that if we get to a point where we believe we have to enforce on one of these things, that the request actually comes to a commander to make that decision. We want several people to think their way through what the best course of action is, because it's very unlikely that us going out there and enforcing against a social distancing against one of our citizens is the best course of action. More likely, it's going to be education and helping them understand what they need to do and why they need to do it.
Ben, I would like to add just a little bit to Chief Straight's comments. We have also referred some of those kinds of complaints, particularly if they involve a business, to Jefferson County Public Health or Tri-County Public Health, depending on the location of where the complaints are. That way, as these orders have been issued by those public health authorities can engage with businesses and help them understand the meaning of those public health authorities, explain to them the possible penalties that might occur if they're not adhered to, and then if necessary, they can involve us in actions that would create additional enforcement. So far, our approach, I think, has been working to the largest extent, and we will continue to work in that vein in terms of the enforcement of these orders.
Okay, thank you. We got a number of questions about the food bank or about community table. For example, Valerie and Lee both asked about what the city is doing to support the food bank so that it can continue to help people. So kind of switching gears here a little bit and talking a little bit more about vibrant communities and neighborhoods and some of our partnerships in that area.
Yes, thank you, Ben. I'm going to ask Deputy City Manager Lori Gillis to respond to that question, as we've been working with members of our team on how to respond to the increased demand for human services.
Thank you, Mr. Devon. The city is looking at providing additional funding through the Arvada Human Services Assistance Program. Specifically, we're working with our nonprofit partners in providing funds for housing, rental assistance, and food. The program will use approximately $150,000 of the city's estimated $267,000 in CDBG CARES money provided to Arvada through the stimulus package. So that's in the works right now, working with our partners, and more to come on that.
Thank you. Just a reminder to folks, we plan for about 10 more minutes of conversation, and we'll do a check and see if we can take a few more questions. But please, if you'd like to add a question to the COVID response at arvada.org email address, please feel free to do that. We received a number of questions around the golf course and the decision to open the golf course. Some frustration noted by Elliot and Karen about people not observing physical distancing while using the golf facilities. I was hoping someone on the city team could talk a little bit about the decision to open the golf courses and our approach to managing that.
Thank you, Ben. As Director of Vibrant Communities and Neighborhoods, Gordon Rusick discussed in his presentation, he described the conditions under which that decision was made, and I think Gordon can elaborate on those conditions and what we're doing right now.
Thank you. Everything at the golf course is closed on March 16th, but in early April, Jefferson County Public Health released new provisional guidelines on how to open golf courses safely. The golf courses are open, but not really in the same way that we've always known them. There is no public contact when you check in. All reservations have to be made online. We're not offering golf carts right now. The practice facilities are closed. And it's the water's been taken away, but the golf course bathrooms are still open. And so it's still the pure traditional form of golf, but the delivery is really with an eye towards safety. So we have been able to focus on delivering golf services following the provisional orders, and our focus has been on education also. We played 300 rounds of golf day, and almost to a person, as they learned what the new rules were, they were followed and adhered to.
Let me echo in on that. I live on the golf course. I've been watching the golfers. I think they are doing a very good job. So And we've got marshals out there as well, who on the rare instance, if there is somebody that's not playing by the rules, it's being watched. So with that, Mr. Marriott.
Yeah, I wanted to add a comment there as well. I think the decision to reopen the golf courses, obviously one of the impacts of that was to take the golf courses away from the folks who lived around the golf courses, who were using the golf courses to recreate in other ways. And what I would say to that is, I would say that what a nice benefits you had for the time the golf courses were closed, but that it's also very important that we get back to normal and get back to normal in ways that we can. The governor laid it out today. We're going to have a phased approach to getting back to normal. So think of golf courses as the first of those items where some sense of normalcy is allowed to happen. And I think there's three things that are important there. One is that the financial performance of the golf courses is important, and that action will help that, although that's far from the primary reason to do it. The second reason really is to get things back to normal, even in a small way like golf, as soon as possible. And then the third is, as a city, we have made a promise, like it or not, when we make golf courses, to make those available to our public, to our recreating public, and that promise still counts. And so it's very important that we keep that promise and make that available when it's possible to do it safely. And the Jefferson County Health Department felt it was possible to do it safely. Personally, I think we should have never closed them in the first place, but we did follow their guidelines, and now we've followed their guidelines to open it. And so that's why we made the decision we made and how we made it. And I think it's important that we did make it.
Ms. Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate, we have heard some concerns on the golf courses, and those are being listened to as well. Just to remind residents, these are wonderful resources that we have for you to enjoy. Please wear a mask, take the proper social distancing precautions out there, wear the mask in the parking lot. That's why the restaurants and the driving range are closed, just to help keep everybody safe. And then in addition, Mr. Devon, if it would be possible, is there a way to contact the marshals should people need help or things of that nature, since they're going to be out there?
I'm sure there is. Gordon, could you elaborate, please, for Councilmember Simpson?
So the marshals keep a close eye. We have more people out on the course making sure that rules are also being followed. Our health maintenance, who is there a lot, have been engaging with a lot of people, and we have our pro shop staff that does frequent checks also, all with the notion of public safety in mind.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jones?
I was just going to say that my two boys I don't remember, it was a couple of days after it opened, they actually went out and played a round of golf, and they said that the marshals were very active in making sure that people understood the rules. And so I think just feedback to all of you that I think that people are playing by the rules. I don't think my boys played by the rules because they counted too many bogeys or not, but that's a whole different story. But they had a great time, and for two, young adults, they were so happy to actually go and do something outside together and play around the golf. And so I'm appreciative that the golf course is open for those reasons. The one thing that they did notice, and I'll just have you make a note of it, is that there were still quite a few people who were using the cart paths as trails. And not that they were walking, but they said there was lots of people that they saw walking on the cart paths as kind of the recreation. And so I don't know how you get that message out that those aren't trails and that they are designed for golfers. Just a little feedback on that. But outside of that, they said that the way they checked in, they didn't really ever talk to anybody. They just showed up and they knew where they were supposed to go, and it actually worked perfectly, or as designed.
Great. So we're going to ask one more here, and then we'll do a time check. We had a question come in over email about the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Securities Act that Congress passed in late March, the CARES Act. And the question is, that there's been some discussion from other municipalities about whether or not they'll receive funding, that cities under 500,000 will not receive funding from the act. Hoping that someone could talk about what they know about where the city of Arvada stands with the CARES Act.
Well, I'll start, and then I think I might invite the mayor or perhaps Councilmember Marriott, who have been dealing with this on both the regional and state level, to make a few comments. The actual stimulus money from the CARES Act, in terms of distribution to local governments, it requires that a local government have a population of $500,000 people or more, and Arvada is not that big, obviously. So in terms of Arvada receiving a direct allocation from CARES Act funding, right now, beyond what Deputy City Manager Laura Gillis mentioned around the supplemental community development block grant funding, we are not slated to receive any direct funding. Mayor, would you like to elaborate on that?
I will, and then I'll call upon Councilmember Marriott through his work with CML on the same topic. Yes, we're in frequent discussions with both the governor's office and also our federal delegation to work on getting dollars allocated to municipalities and counties of less than 500,000 residents, because there's a lot of damage that's being done to local economies, to the municipalities and the counties, and so we're going to continue to urge some allocation within the next round of funding for cities such as Arvada and to assist us as much as we can. Mr. Marriott?
Yeah, thank you. I have a comment about it as well. So I don't know if most people know this or not, but in the state of Colorado, local government is very powerful compared to other states. In fact, about 50% of all government spending happens at the local level. The CARES Act dedicated funding to the states and to local governments of 500,000 people or bigger, and didn't say anything at all about local governments smaller than 500,000. So the state has received an allocation, and 5 local governments in the state, the city of Denver, the county of Denver, El Paso County, Arapahoe County, and Jefferson County, have all received allocations directly out of the CARES Act. That leaves all the rest of the counties and cities and towns and municipalities in the state that did not get any funding out of that CARES Act. Now, the state could allocate money out of the money that was given to the state and split that amongst both the state government and the local governments. And to be fair to the state, they've not made a decision yet on exactly what they're going to do. So they have not said we're not going to share the money with local governments, but they also haven't said that they are going to share the money with local governments. And I believe the way the process will work, the legislature will actually be the one who will designate where some of that money goes. However, the legislature oftentimes follows the lead of the governor, who has been so far fairly silent on this, at least with specifics. And so at this point, we don't know. It is possible that the state could allocate some of that money to local governments. It's also possible that the state may not. And currently, I know the Department of Local Affairs is pushing for additional federal money, and that once they get that, they may decide on then an allocation for local governments. My view on it is this. I think it's really important and would be very important for the governor to lead on this, or the legislature to lead on this, and to allocate that money, or some of that money, the portion of that money that local governments take care of, to local governments. The city has already incurred significant costs related to dealing with the COVID health issue, as well as, of course, local governments are going to be missing lots of revenue. Local governments are largely funded by sales tax, whereas the state government is funded by both sales tax and income tax. So they will not see quite the impact that we will have. So I would say at this point, it's up in the air. I'm hopeful that we will receive some funding from it, but so far we have not.
All right, thank you all for that. I noticed the time. I note the time. We've gone a little over an hour now, and appreciate everybody's energy and attention to answering these questions. Before we share some final resources with people and some reminders, Mr. Devon, I wanted to send it back to you for any final thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Ben. I want to thank the Arvada community. I think the mayor said it very well during his comments. The Arvada community has been supportive and has worked very well with our team and with their neighbors. I also want to make sure that I thank our entire team and our city council. I think one of the reasons why government works here in Arvada, why we work well as a community, is because our city team, our city council work together as a team to try to do our best in serving the community. And our team is very highly engaged, very highly focused, and very highly supported by our city council. And as long as we can continue to do that, I think we'll continue to be successful. Thank you.
All right, Mayor Williams, anything else that you'd like to add before we end?
Just want to thank everybody for participating. Thank the citizens for following this here. This is important stuff, and we miss being able to see you in person, but this is the next best thing. So thank you all.
All right. Well, again, I'd like to also echo everyone's thanks and just remind everyone that this will appear on Channel 8, a recording of this forum, and we'll also share it on our YouTube channel. We want to encourage our citizens to follow authoritative sources of health, such as the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, Public Health and Environment, for more information about COVID-19. The city has provided a resource around its response to the health crisis. You can find that at arvada.org/COVID-19. We also encourage you to share ideas for how you're staying socially connected and passing along kindness and staying energized during a very challenging time. Finally, you can share these ideas on social media and respond to what you've heard tonight, and anything else related to managing this difficult moment in our history by tagging your posts on social media with #WeCanDoThisArvada. So with that, I thank you for joining us. I'd especially like to thank Mayor and City Council members for their questions and discussion. I'd like to thank Mr. Devon, as well as the members of the leadership team for their help in preparing for this, as well as other members of the city team. And I wish all of you a good night. Thank you.